We should now be ready to deploy our basic Flask application and its database to Heroku. Heroku is a platform as a service. It is fully managed. It gives developers the freedom to focus on their core product without distraction of maintaining servers, hardware, or infrastructure. On their documentation on their website here, they have instructions for installing the command line tools. You're also going to need Git and a basic familiarity with Git commands. We have our application here. We have one Python file and one HTML file. They are in one project directory. Templates is a subdirectory. It's a project structure. And we do have a local SQLite database currently. And that was great for testing purposes, but we're now ready to migrate to a Postgres database. In order to do that, we're going to need a couple of things. We are still in our virtual environment, which we created in a previous video. We have these packages currently installed. We're going to need 2 additional packages in order to deploy to Heroku effectively. One of which is going to be gUnicorn. gUnicorn is a pre-fork worker model, which allows the server to handle a large number of requests, like we'll expect in a production environment. Up till now, we've been using the local development server, which was called with the app.run, but we're going to replace that with gUnicorn, so we're going to go ahead and install that. gUnicorn. Alright, we've now installed that, and we're also going to need a database adapter, which is basically a wrapper for the Postgres system, which exposes a Python compatible API and should allow us to use our SQL Alchemy on the Heroku servers. So we're going to go ahead and install that. Alright, you can see that we now have 2 additional packages installed. In order to deploy to Heroku, we're going to need 2 additional files in our project directory, one of which is requirements.txt, and that contains a list of the packages which our Python application will require. In order to generate that, we're going to use pip freeze, and we're going to pipe the output from that into a text file, which we will call requirements.txt. So you can see that we now have that file in our project directory here, requirements.txt. If we open that up, we can see that it does contain a list of the packages along with the version number. This does ensure that we will have a consistent environment and should help us to avoid problems associated with unexpected updates. We're also going to need what is called a proc file. So the requirements.txt file does need to be named just that, in exactly that format. The proc file needs to be named like this, PROCFILE, with a capital P and no file extension, just exactly like that. And what we're going to do here is we're going to set up the type of worker that we're going to use, which is, in this case, it's just going to be web, and we're going to use gUnicorn. And one more thing we're going to have, which is going to be the name of the module or package, and then the name of the main function or callable, which in our case is going to be dbapp. And if we remember, what we actually called the actual instance was dbA. So you are going to need to watch out for that. So dbapp is the name of the module or package. And then dbA is the main function. And that's actually it for our proc file. That'll just tell the Heroku servers how to basic configuration when they're starting up. So that's in order. And in order to push our code to the Heroku servers, we will be using Git. So we're going to create a Git repository within our project directory Using the command line, we'll just do git init. You can see that we now have a git directory within our project directory. Now that we have our proc file, our requirements.txt, and our git repository initialized, we're going to go ahead and create the application on the Heroku servers. We're going to use Heroku, and we're going to use the Heroku create command, and then we're going to provide the name of our application. I'm going to call it db app. It must be unique, it must be all lowercase, and I believe it must start with a letter. So we've got db app, and I'm just going to give it a random sequence to ensure that it is unique. Looks like it was created successfully. So now that we have an app, we can check to see what add-ons we have. Heroku add-ons. We don't currently have any add-ons. And what an add-on is, it's just additional functionality that we can add to our application. Didn't really discuss the setup of the Heroku, but I just registered with them, and this is just a basic hobby account, which does allow you to have up to 5 applications. And the only real drawback is that you can have only 5 applications, and after 30 minutes of inactivity, they will time out. So they will have to be spun back up, basically, after 30-minute inactivity, which in practical terms means it's going to take about 30 seconds of additional load time, which is fine for our demonstration purposes here today. So we're going to use the command line to add a Postgres add-on. We're just going to use the free hobby version. So we're going to use Heroku add-ons, create. We're going to create an add-on, and the one we're going to create is going to be Heroku Postgres. And the specific plan we're going to use is just going to be hobby dev, and that is the free one. It's trying to create it. Looks like it was created. We can confirm that it was created with Heroku add-ons again. You can see now that we do have a Postgres database add-on set up with our application. And from previous videos, we'll recall that we were using SQLite for the local database. We're going to change that. I'm going to comment that out, and then I'm going to grab the configuration key. So this was setting the key from that dictionary that stores the configuration values for our application. And I'm going to replace the SQLite portion with the URI of our database, Postgres database that we just created with Heroku. So we need to get that information. We can either use the website or we can use the command line. We're going to use the command line here. Let's see, Heroku PG, then we do credentials, URL, and that right there should hopefully be the URL. The connection URL should be the address to which we should set this key. It is a string. We make sure that it's wrapped in quotes. And then we can go ahead and save that. Okay, make sure that it's looking good, wrapped in quotes. We got the URL string there. And I think we're about ready to push our code to the Heroku servers. We added our files, we created our app, we created the database, we updated the URL, and now we're going to set up the remote. We do need to set up the remote repository, and we can use Heroku remote. Now Heroku get remote -a, and then we provide the name of the application, which was db app 432 in our case. Okay, we've set a remote. We should now be ready to push the code. Before we do that, let's check the status of our repository. And we do have several untracked files. It's probably a good idea to go ahead and create a gitignore file. So vi.gitignore. And the files I don't want to push to the remote are definitely going to be everything in the PyCache directory. So I'm going to enter insert mode, and then we're going to provide that. We're also probably going to leave out the testdb.db. And I think that should be good. So I'm going to use that to save and exit. And let's run that last command again. Oh, not that one. Let's check the status. So you can see that we're no longer tracking the PyCache, and we don't have the DB anymore. So that's progress. We're now going to add all of those to the staging area. Git add, we're going to add all of them. And we're now ready to commit them. So we'll use git commit, and we're going to provide a message. We're going to provide it through the command line here, and I'm just going to call this initial. Not very informative, but I think that's what this is. This is an initial commit. And now we're going to push the code to the remote server. So git push Heroku master. So right now the server is going out. It's using pip to install all of the packages which were listed in the requirements.txt file. It's then going to kind of compile them all down into what they call a slug, and it's going to produce a containerized environment in which to run this whole thing, and it's going to use the proc file to start the appropriate worker processes. Ours is the WSGI provided by gunicorn. So with any luck, we should be deployed. And there is one last thing we're going to want to do. Similar to how we created the SQLite database locally, the file does not actually yet exist. We do have a URI for that, but we're going to go ahead and create that file. So we can do Heroku run, and we can actually run Python on that server. And then we can import from our app, and we can create that database. So from db app, we're going to import db and also user, the model for our database. Looks like that worked. Then we're going to use the create all, db.create_all. And that should have created an instance of the actual file for our database remotely on that server. So we're now going to quit out of Python, and we're going to fire up the browser and see if we can access that site. So let's pull up a browser here, and the URL for our site is here. So I'm just going to actually copy the link. Could have just opened it. We'll copy it, paste it, and there we have it. It looks like our web application is certainly working. We've got the form displayed here. Let's see if the database is working. So I'm going to call user1, password 1, submit. Looks like it's working. Let's do one more. Let's do user2, give them a password of 2, submit, and there you have it. We have built a web application using the Flask micro framework. We created a database, first using SQLite and then Postgres, and we ultimately deployed that to Heroku. So it is available on the web, and let's call that a success. All right, tune in next time.